weapon may be formed, but it won't prosper. And when the darkness falls, it won't prevail. For the God I serve knows only how to triumph. My God will never fail. Sing that out. Oh, my God will never fail. Come on, together. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. Come on. I'm gonna see a
Welcome, and thank you for joining us on our live stream. We believe here at Active that you are worth knowing, so we created this content designed for you to explore your faith and belief wherever you're at. So welcome, and please enjoy the message.
Well, good morning, Active Church. How you feeling this morning? You doing good? Great to see you. Welcome to our Yucaipa location and welcome to those watching from our Redlands location. My name is Mike and I am going through puberty apparently because that's what my voice sounds like right now. Battling a cough this week, and so I ask for your forgiveness for my early pubescent voice, all right? We're glad that you're here today for a series that we're calling No Such Thing, and we're talking about parenting and we're talking about raising kids, and you actually can help us with something. Before we dive in, I need a favor from you. At the end of this series in 2 weeks, Pastor James and our creative team are creating a really incredible moment for that service. It'll be a great exclamation point for the end of this conversation, and here's where we need your help. If you're comfortable, we would love for you to send us photos and videos of significant moments in your family's story. Maybe it was a moment where your child walked for the first time, or maybe they walked at graduation. Whatever would be convenient for you and you would be comfortable sending us, we would love to take those photos and those videos, and we're gonna create a special moment in the final Sunday of this series, and it'll be at both locations. And so Redlands, we would love for you to participate in this as well. And you can send us those photos and videos to info@activechurches.com. info@activechurches.com. If you're comfortable, we're only gonna use it for this moment, and we would love to celebrate some milestones that have happened in your family. So if you wanna send those to us over the next couple of weeks, that would be awesome, and we're gonna incorporate it into a really special moment. And if you know our team, if you've been around for a while, they knock these special moments out, and it'll be a great exclamation point for this series. This series is called No Such Thing. And we're discovering that there's no such thing as the perfect parent. And what I learned last week in some conversations with you, is some of you shared your personal story with me, is that this conversation began to reframe how you will parent, because maybe how you were parented wasn't healthy, wasn't good. Maybe it's beginning to teach you how to relearn how you are currently parenting. Wherever you're at, we're thankful that you're a part of Active, and I want you to know that even if you're not a parent, even if you're an aunt or an uncle or maybe an adoptive grandparent or an educator or a teacher, this conversation is for you as well, because we all have influence over kids. And what we began last week is we began to tackle the myths that we believe about ourselves, about our parenting, about our kids, and stepping into what's true about ourselves and our parenting and our kids. And so the first myth that we tackled last week was this one: with the right formula, I can be the perfect parent. And I know that those phrases, perfect parent, those words, may not hit you in a way where you're like, yeah, I want to be perfect. I know that you don't want to be perfect. But isn't it true that we're looking for any kind of formula? We're looking for any kind of direction, any kind of help. And what we learned last week is that it's a myth to try to find that perfect formula. It's a myth to try to be that perfect parent. The truth is that we need a pathway of faithfulness. See, faithfulness is when we're choosing to love when we don't feel like it. We're choosing to lean in when everything in us wants to lean out. Faithfulness is deciding to lead our kids where they don't naturally want to go. And faithfulness is working on next time, so that next time isn't like last time. Which brings us to this morning, and the myth that we're gonna tackle together is this one: I need to protect my child from everything. We love it when things are safe, don't we? Parents, we love to make things safe. I'm learning this because currently I have a 16-year-old daughter that's learning how to drive. This is a photo of her throwing her keys up in the air and super excited about it. And I look at that photo and I ask myself this question: how in the world did I get here? I am not that old and she is not that. We were still dancing in her princess dress. She was wearing the princess dress, but we were still dancing together to her princess songs in her princess dress. And here she is, 16 years old. And so we're teaching her how to drive, and it's been an adventure, to say the least. And what I've learned about myself is that I am more aware of safety now that we're teaching her how to drive. But I'm not as aware of it when I'm driving. Not because I don't care about safety, Not because I'm a chaotic driver, but the reason why I'm not as aware of it, it's not much of a priority for me when I'm driving, is because I'm in control. And when I'm in control, I know how fast I'm going. When I'm in control, I know where the car is going. When I'm in control, I can anticipate that car or that pedestrian. But when I'm sitting in the passenger seat and this little princess is sitting in the driver's seat, man, I'll tell you, I am aware of everything that isn't safe. I'm aware of how fast we're going. I'm aware of what she's not paying attention to. I'm aware of that passenger and that car, and did you see that light? And did you see the speed limit? And did you see that sign? Do you know what time it is? Do you see the sun? And the earth is on its axis. Like, I'm asking all of these questions, right? Because I want it to be safe, because truthfully, she's precious cargo. There was the other day, we were out to lunch, and Abby asked if she could drive home. And I said, sure. And so she got into the car, I'm in the passenger seat, and of course I'm aware of all the unsafe environment around us. She's getting ready to pull out onto a busy road, and it took her 4 or 5 times, no joke, 4 or 5 times to actually decide when she was gonna go. Finally, I had it. I said, honey, put the car in park. So she did. I said, unbuckle your seatbelt. She did. And I said, switch me. And so we got out of the car, got into the car. Guess who drove home? I drove home. I made it safe. And I know that doesn't help her, but I'm realizing that we like it when it's safe. And I don't think it's just a parent thing. I don't think it's just those that are raising kids want it safe thing. I think it's an adult thing. Some of you know that I was born and raised in a Christian home and have been a part of the church for a very long time. And so I get to poke fun at the church. I have permission. God said I do, all right? And so there were moments when I was a kid that I would always laugh at what people would pray for, especially in those moments where people are praying for those that are taking a risk or choosing to be courageous. They would gather them around and they would pray for 2 things. One, they would pray for, as they're getting ready to travel to a faraway land or do something courageous, they would pray for traveling mercies. Anybody ever prayed for traveling mercies? Yeah. I always as a kid thought, like, what is that? It's like, is it angels like floating next to the car, or God's hand like traveling? Like, it's the only car on the freeway that's just like Back to the Future floating as it goes down, right? The second thing that people would pray for is a hedge of protection. And I remember as a kid going, so you want a bush to surround you? Like juniper or eucalyptus? Like you're gonna walk around like looking like poison ivy from the Batman villain? Like that's what you're gonna look like? And I'm not really wanting to poke fun at that. I just want to point out that it's weird. And if you're not a Christian or if you're new to church and you think that that's weird, listen, it's weird. And the reason why it was weird for me is because when I look at what the early church prayed for, they didn't pray for stuff like that. There's nowhere in the scriptures where they prayed for things like that. And I get the intent behind it. We don't want people to get hurt. We want people to come back to us. I understand that. But the thing that blew my mind when I would read about the first church after the resurrection of Jesus, as they were being threatened for their faith, they were being put into prisons, and some of them even lost their life. They would pray remarkable prayers. Luke, who was a part of the first church, wrote a letter called Acts. And it's in this letter that he records one of the prayers after they're being threatened and some of them lose their lives. And these are the words that he writes down. Lord, consider their threats and enable your servants to speak your word with great boldness. That's their prayer. God, don't cause us to stop. Help us to keep going. Give us the strength and the boldness to do what it is that you've created us to do. Listen, I don't think safety is a bad thing. So don't hear me say that. I think safety should be a priority. In fact, it's a priority of active kids. It's a priority of you dropping your kids off, because if you weren't confident that your kids are comfortable today, then you wouldn't be comfortable. But the truth is, we sometimes prioritize safety over everything else, and when safety is the priority, it keeps us from living courageously. Which is why I don't believe that we as parents should protect our child from everything. I believe that the truth that we need to step into as parents and raising kids and those that have influence over kids is this: that I want to prepare my child for anything. I want to prepare them for anything. It's why Tiff and I, before we go to sleep at night, we'll pray together. And we're about 90% of the time praying together. The other 10%, either I fell asleep or she fell asleep. So if you fall asleep, you're not sinful. You're still going to heaven. Jesus still loves you, just so you know. But we have a time at night where we will pray together. And one of the prayers that we've committed to praying since we first got into a relationship, since we first got married, is this one: God, give us wisdom to know what to do and the courage to do it. See, those words are powerful, but it's the actions that make those words powerful. And if you're like me, then maybe you need some specifics. It's always good to have maybe 1 or 2 or even 3 steps that we could take to move forward as we're parenting our kids, because isn't it true that parenting is complicated? And we want to get it right. And that's why I love that you're here, because Active Church wants to help. And so here's what I want to do today. I want to take you to a true real life moment in the life of Jesus, where he is interacting with his first followers, the first disciples, the learners of the way of Jesus. And it's in this story that we learn some principles that we can apply in our parenting. And so I want to give you 3 things to do and then 1 thing for you. 3 things to do and then 1 thing for you. So if you brought a Bible with you, or if you have the Bible app on your phone, we're going to be in a letter called Matthew in the Bible. Matthew chapter 14, we'll start in verse 22. If you don't have a Bible or the Bible app on your phone, don't worry, we'll have the verses on the screen for you, along with some notes to help you follow along. But Matthew was one of the first followers of Jesus, and he wrote down his interactions with Jesus because he wanted others, you, to know the story. In Matthew, his letter is one of the most significant letters in telling the story of Jesus. And this moment he records is actually a moment that's famous for a lot of church people. It's even famous for those people that aren't church people. And it follows another famous story that most people know about. The story that we're going to engage in actually follows the story where Jesus feeds 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And then this next story is the response, the afterwards of that story. And that's where we pick up what Matthew's telling us. And it's a true story of the real Jesus and those who really followed him. And in Matthew 14, starting in verse 22, Matthew records this: immediately Jesus made the disciples get into a boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. And after he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. And then evening came and he was there alone. But the boat was already a considerable distance from the land. And during the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. Now, maybe you've been a follower of Jesus for a while, or a church person for a while. And so you know this story, or maybe you're new to this thing, you're new to church. And so you may have heard this story before, but I think often what we do when we read these stories is we go, man, I wonder what it was like to do life with Jesus. I wonder what it was like to see these things take place, to have incredible moments like this just completely wreck us. And my answer to that, because I ask those questions, my answer to that is this: you already know. Because you've experienced it when they said yes to your invitation to sit with you at Active. You experienced it when they said yes to Jesus. You experienced it when we celebrate life change through baptism. You experienced it when we provided resource, materials, and financial resource to our friends who suffered great loss at the Sandalwood fire. See, I think often we want the stories of old to be our stories in the present day, and Jesus and the writers of the scriptures announce that Jesus is still at work in you today, that he is still up to something in you today. Many of us might say, well, I'd like the physical Jesus to be with me today. And my pushback would be, no, you wouldn't, because you get freaked out when someone taps on your window when you're not expecting them. You get freaked out when it's someone who's not in your family that's around the corner at your house, right? I think often we were like, oh, I want the real physical Jesus, but I really believe that our response to the real physical Jesus would be the same response that his first followers had when Jesus did something remarkable, like walking on water. Here's their response. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. You know what keeps us from engaging the story of God? We're terrified that what we've been taught or what we've experienced from other Christians is actually not who God is. That perhaps God is actually the God who we meet and know in Jesus. And what terrifies us is that he's going to know everything about us, and then he's going to offer love to us and forgiveness for us. And what terrifies us is it means we're going to have to change our way. But if you dig deep down, isn't it true that you want to change your ways? They were terrified, and they yelled out, "It's a ghost!" They said, and they cried out in fear. And then Jesus, I love these words. Jesus, I'm going to use this next time I play hide and go seek. Jesus says immediately to them, "Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid." Wouldn't that be great in like hide and go seek? And if you don't have little kids, play it anyway, all right? Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. You know the number one command in all of the scriptures is that phrase, don't be afraid. You don't need to be terrified because it's Jesus. You don't need to be afraid because it's God. And then I love Peter. He's my favorite person in all of the Bible because he's a knucklehead just like I am. And Peter's like, "All right, Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." Let's prove it right now. It's not a ghost, it's you. Tell me to come to you, Jesus. And I love the invitation of Jesus in verse 29. He says, come on. Can you imagine that moment? Oh dear. It really is him. And then everybody's looking at Peter going, "You go, man. You take the step." But it's in this moment that we discover the first thing that we can do as parents as we prepare our kids for anything. Whether they're young or they're teenagers or they're young adults or even if they're grown up and they're out of the house. If you want to prepare your kids for anything, the first thing that you need to do is to teach them to say yes to Jesus every single time. Because Jesus can be trusted. And he proved it because he said, "I was going to die on a cross and rise again," and then he did it. And listen, don't miss this. If there's anything else, if you miss everything else, don't miss this. Listen, if anybody says that they're going to die and then rise again and then actually do it, pay attention to them because there's something special. And only Jesus predicted his death and resurrection and then actually did it. He can be trusted. And I want my kids to trust in the God who gave me my kids. I want my kids to put their faith in the God who gave me the opportunity to have faith. You want to prepare your kids for anything? Teach them to say yes to Jesus every single time, because saying yes to Jesus is saying yes to love. Personal love. The love of God that says, "I don't condemn you, I rescue you." Who calls sin, sin, and then pays for it. The God who sent his son Jesus to be like you, to empathize and sympathize with what you're going through. And to carry that for you and to remove it from you so that you could experience forgiveness, so that you could live without regret, shame, and embarrassment. The God who says, "I don't condemn you, I go with you." The God who's speaking to you right now that as you wrestle with whatever it is that you're not telling anybody about. The God who says, you don't have to live like this. And you know that you don't have to live like this, but you just haven't had the courage to say, "I don't want to live like this," out loud. Saying yes to Jesus is saying yes to love privately, personally, but also publicly. It determines how you treat those around you, because how I feel about God will come out in how I treat you and speak to you. And so when I'm changed in my heart, I can bring change to the hearts of those around me, because the power of God is working in me and through me. Saying yes to Jesus is also saying yes to courage. It chooses to lean in and not lean out. It chooses to go there instead of staying away from there. Saying yes to Jesus is choosing to have the conversation because confrontation means that I love you. Saying yes to Jesus recognizes that I would rather be reconciled than right. And that you and I can have a better relationship when we're actually in relationship and we choose to love each other. And saying yes to Jesus is saying yes to joy. Joy is different than happiness. Happiness is dictated by your circumstances. It's dictated by your followers on Instagram. It's dictated by if someone invited you or not. Joy chooses how you will face those circumstances. Many of you, I'm sure, the stories that I know and the stories that I don't know, here in Yucaipa and in Redlands, many of you could have stories of where you could have decided to be sad and angry, but you decided to choose joy. Joy believes that the best is yet to come. And maybe what you're wrestling through and maybe what your child might wrestle through is, well, how do I know it's Jesus? Well, here's what's so brilliant about God. He told us, here's what you can do. You can ask, seek, and knock. Asking is praying. Prayer is not a platitude that we throw out when tragedy happens, although it is a platitude that we have thrown out when tragedy happens. But prayer is the ability to access God in intimacy, to be as honest as you can be, knowing that He knows you, and not holding back, and asking those questions and laying out those doubts and those struggles. Prayer is intimacy with God. God, what are you doing and can I be a part of it? God, is this you? I need some wisdom here. Jesus says ask and then seek. Seeking is powerful because seeking is discovering the story of Jesus, the true story of Jesus found in the pages and documents that we call the Bible. You want to know what God is like? Look at Jesus. How would God respond? Look at Jesus. What would God say? Look at Jesus. Jesus is the exact example of what God is like. If you're struggling with what you've been taught about God or what you've heard about God or what you've seen and experienced from God, look at Jesus. Because that's the God that engages you and me. And then when you ask, you seek, and you knock. Knock is important because knock reminds us that we have to be in relationship with each other. You were not meant to do life in isolation, which is why I'm so excited that you showed up here in Yucaipa and in Redlands. Because this is the first step for you to make powerful decisions in your life and not to make those decisions alone, where you can seek wisdom from those around you, especially as we talk about parenting, because there are some rock star parents here at Active Church. There are people like Virgil and Alice Barham, who I love. And there are people like in Redlands, the Johnson family, who are rock star parents. You can ask wisdom from them, and I know both of them, and they will filter that through their love and concern and care for you and their love and their surrender to God. This is what Jesus invites us to. You want to prepare your kids for anything? Teach them to say yes to Jesus every single time. And so Peter says yes. And Jesus says, come on. And Matthew tells us that then Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came towards Jesus. He took that first, should I do this? Fellas, what do you think? Can you imagine that moment where he steps down onto the water and he realizes that this isn't a magic trick, that that's not David Blaine, that's Jesus Christ, and that his foot is firm as well? You want to prepare your kids for anything? Teach them that simple steps are always the best steps. I think the reason why we say no to a lot of things is because it's illogical and it's a leap. The reason why we say no, because we just don't think that we can sustain that in our mind and in our heart. We don't have the energy or the capacity for it. We might have been created for it, but the best thing to do, especially as you parent and raise kids, is to help identify what's next, and make it simple. And here's why. Simple steps give wisdom permission to lead the way. We all want to be wise, but often we don't give ourselves time to be wise. We rush. Listen, you can move fast and be wise, but it's when we decide to rush, when we decide to just say okay because we're tired of them asking, that's when we find ourselves not walking in wisdom. A few months back, my oldest daughter was making a very pivotal life decision. And we were excited about her pivotal life decision. And so we were interacting with her, and we're so grateful that she would trust us with this. And so typically what happens in our family is that she'll have the long conversation with mom, and then she'll come and summarize it for dad, and then dad and I, or Abby and I, will have this conversation, and it's quick and it's to the point, and I'll give her some simple steps, and that's how we've kind of teamed up together. And so Abby made this really great decision. We were excited about this great decision, and then about a month later, she came to us. We were asking her about this decision, and she said something really powerful in that conversation. And yet for her, I don't even know if she knew that it was powerful. It may have been so simple to her, but we were asking, hey, how's this going? Hey, what's going on? And she said these words to me and to my wife. She said, I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to listen, and I'm going to watch. Because she made this powerful decision, but she knew that it was just a simple step and that there were more steps to come, and she wanted to choose wisdom. So she said, I'm going to pay attention, I'm going to listen, and I'm going to watch. And I want you to know that in that conversation, Tiff and I and Abby are having this conversation. Tiff and I kept our cool. We held it together because we were like, hey girl, that's good, right? So then she went into her room, she closed the door, we went into our room, we closed the door, and we were like, yeah, she's choosing wisdom, look at her. You know what I mean? We were so excited. You ever danced when your kid made a good decision? You're like, we did something right? Because those are celebratory moments. And for my oldest daughter, I want her to continue to do that because that's how she's going to grow in her faith. And one day I won't be around, and I want her to make those decisions on her own. And so we got to celebrate that moment. Man, if you want to prepare your kids for anything, teach them that simple steps are always the best steps. But then when you take those simple steps, it doesn't mean that everything is going to be perfect. Everything's not going to be the way that you want it. And we see that in this story because Peter takes his step outside of the boat, maybe takes his second step on the water. He's thinking he's a rock star. He's thinking he's awesome. And then he looks around and notices that there's waves and wind and it's dark. And is that really David Blaine, or is it Jesus? Is it a ghost? I'm not sure. And he begins to freak out. And the writer tells us this, but when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. Every parent's heart at Active Church just felt the anxiety of those moments where your kid is sinking. And the reason why we like safety is because we like to swoop in. We put on our cape and we fly in. I'm Mighty Mike. I'm coming to rescue. But here's the thing that I'm learning that I've been taught by great friends and a great God. Sometimes my kids need to sink in order for the lesson to sink in. And that is terrible. But what you are able to teach them, if you want to prepare them for anything, what you can teach them in that moment is failure is never final. Because you taught them to say yes to Jesus every single time. And that they will always have you to rescue them, to step in, to walk with them. You're in this thing with them for the long haul, but even better, God is in this thing with them for the long haul. When I first started at Active, I got to volunteer in a lot of different places. One of the places that I loved volunteering in was in our Active Kids area, because I got to see how the leaders invested in these kids. One of those leaders is Jeff Buckmaster. Jeff usually sits over here somewhere. There he is. Hi, Jeff. If you don't know Jeff, you got to know Jeff because he's got this WWE name, Jeff Buckmaster. That's awesome, right? But the reason why I love Jeff is because anytime you ask him for something, he says yes, because he's a servant. But more importantly, what I loved about Jeff when I first started is he would grab his guitar and he would lead our kids in a song. And then it was a song that we would sing when we would go to Mexico. It was a song we would sing when we were with adults. It was a song, I think it's the only song that Jeff knows, I think, honestly. But it was a song that actually is from the Psalms. And the Psalms goes this way. I lift my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. Anytime I hear this song and anytime I find myself sinking and anytime I see myself sinking, Jeff, I think of that song. And I think of what God does in those moments when we're sinking. God doesn't leave us or turn his back on us. God is reaching a hand down because that's the God that you and I trust in. And that's the God that you and I are trusting our kids to. Peter cries out, Lord, save me. And I love the next line, immediately. Not when he got around to it, not when he surfed a wave, but immediately Jesus reached out his hand and he caught him. And then he says something, I think at first it feels offensive, but it's really powerful. He says, you have little faith, why did you doubt? Why did you doubt? In other words, bro, I was right here the whole time. You were walking, you were doing great. Didn't you realize that you could have made it all the way here? I had you. And I'll always have you. If you want to teach your kids to be prepared for anything, remind them that failure isn't final, no matter how old they are. And if you are empty nesters, maybe your child needs to hear that more now than they did when they were young. Because maybe as they grow up, as they parent, they're struggling. And they may need to hear your voice say, listen, this isn't the end. So I had 3 things for you to do. And then there's one thing specifically for you to prepare yourself for these moments. And we find that when they get back into the boat. When they climbed back into the boat, the wind died down, and then those who were in the boat worshiped Jesus, saying, truly you are the Son of God. You know, the best thing that we can do as we prepare our kids for anything is we can be prepared for anything as well when we decide to choose worship over worry. And that's hard. It's difficult. And I've been a Christian a long time, and I've been a pastor a long time, and it's hard and it's difficult because emotions are real, thoughts can go crazy. But here's the difference. Worship is choosing to trust the Savior. Worry is working to try to make it safe. And can I say something to you? I know I said earlier that this is the one thing I don't want you to miss. Well, I lied. This is actually the thing I don't want you to miss. So don't miss this. It's safer in the boat with you, but they will never walk on the water with Jesus. So if you want to keep them in the boat, it's safer in the boat with you. But they may never take the step to walk on the water with Jesus. So Active Church, let them go into the Savior's hands. We're going to trust in the Savior who saved us. And if you don't know that Savior, you should know him. Because he rescues and saves. And he's in this mess with us for the long haul. And he turns our mess into a message. And he turns our parenting into something beautiful. At the end of last year, I read about a tragedy that took place in the life of a musical artist. His name is Toby Mac. If you don't know who Toby Mac is, he is really well known in the Christian world. He was a part of DC Talk back in the early 90s. That was like the U2 band in secular world, all right? Like they didn't sound the same, but they were as popular as U2. People loved them. Toby tragically lost his 21-year-old son. And people had a lot of questions about that, as people do. And one of the questions was, you're a Christian artist who has been serving God for so many years, and you've lost your son. Aren't you mad at God? Aren't you angry with God? And Toby and his wife released a statement to respond to that question, and it is the most fascinating statement. Here's what they said. My wife and I want the world to know that this. We don't follow God because we have some sort of under-the-table deal with him. Like, we'll follow you if you bless us. We follow God because we love him. It's our honor. He is the God of the hills and the valleys, and he is beautiful above all things. So, Active Church, instead of protecting our kids from everything, let's decide to prepare them for anything. To teach them to say yes to Jesus, to take simple steps, to understand that failure isn't final. And by the way, for you, be prepared by choosing worship over worry. Last week I gave you some homework. I hope you turned it in on time. If you missed it, you can check out our podcast at Active Churches on Spotify and iTunes. This week I have some homework for you as well. You can do all of it, you can do none of it. You're not graded on it. Jesus still loves you, still going to heaven. But this is something that I believe will be helpful for you. So in response to this truth that we want to prepare our kids for anything, I want to invite you to do one of three things, two of three things, or all three things. The first is this. I want to invite you to lead a family connection group. Connection groups are groups of 8 to 12 people that meet throughout the week for a period of 10 to 12 weeks, and we're going to launch those on February 9th. And if you currently lead a group, awesome. If you want to lead a group, awesome. I'll give you instructions in just a minute, but I want to speak to those families for a moment. Those families who may have not had time to schedule in a group because of work or because of life or because of sports. I want to speak to you about leading your family into the story of God. Because there's nothing like it, and it could change everything for you. Like it did for my friends Jesse and Susan, who last season in our connection group season decided to lead a family group. And then randomly, a couple weeks ago, Jesse sent me a message to tell me about it. And so I asked his permission to share that message with you, and here's what he wrote. My family and extended family started active connection groups, and we committed for 12 weeks. At about the same time, a book was recommended to us that goes through biblical stories of the Old and New Testament in a format that our kids would understand. We started our studies, we followed Active's material, and I would prepare on the weekends, reading the guide, expanding our study, reflecting a theme or a principle that I found in the reading each week. And then also each week, a kid would present a Bible story along with how it pointed to Jesus and a lesson from the story. And then each week, they would pick a new cousin to present the following week. So every week, half of the study was led by an adult and half was led by a kid. We did a total of 13 gatherings between the adult and kid-led portions, and we've covered so much. Mike, it's been amazing. The adults have mentioned over and over and over again that they've learned so much in the last 13 weeks than they ever have before. The kids loved our time together, even demanding not to stop because we finished our commitment. And 2 of my sister's kids were baptized at Active in December. Personally, it's been life-changing. Preparing for studies like this have helped me dig into the Bible like never before. I've always felt like I should be doing something more. I think that all of us feel that way. I'm embarrassed to say that these last 13 weeks are the most intentional I've been with my family. I'm embarrassed, but also encouraged. And our plan is to continue weekly. And I just wanted to say thank you for inviting us to First Step. That's where Susan and I decided to start this study. Maybe that's what you need to do. And you can get started in a very simple way. Pull out your phone and text host to the number on the screen. And guys, could we leave that up for just a minute so that people could text that? What you'll get in response to this text is all of the instructions of what to do next. We provide all the material. We launch on February 9th, and all you need to do is follow the instructions in the text message. I'm believing that this will be the best season of faith for your family yet when you say yes to this. If you are a group host and you host a friend group, not a family group, I would invite you to actually do this now as well, because this is how you'll get your material, Yucaipa and Redlands. Text host to the number on the screen. If you're above 50, here's what you do. You put the number in on the number line, and then host is in the message, and then you hit send, all right? I want to invite you to host a family connection group. The second piece of homework is I want to invite you to choose to get baptized on February 2nd. Life change is powerful, not just for you, but for those that are in your life watching you. And perhaps it's time for you to get baptized. You can fill out the card that's in the seat back in front of you, check the baptism box. You can drop it by Guest Central today. And the last piece of homework is I would encourage you to invite someone to come sit with you at Active. We all know parents, people that are raising kids that are struggling. Let's invite them into a space where they can struggle honestly and discover a better way forward. Friends, let's not protect our kids from everything. Let's prepare them for anything. And we'll discover that there's no such thing as a perfect parent. May I pray for you? God, wow. I don't know the stories of those that are here in Yucaipa and in Redlands. But I do know that you know their hearts, you know their minds, you know what's broken, and you know what is healing. And you know that a better story is possible for them. And so wherever they find themselves in this season of parenting and raising kids, God, would you speak hope into that moment? Would you speak healing into that season? I don't know what this conversation sparked, but I do know that you believe the best is yet to come because you are God and you are good. And we want to trust in you. So thank you for not protecting us from everything, but preparing us for anything. And teach us to do the same for the kids that we love. No matter how young or how old they are. And we can say these things because of Jesus, and it's in his name that we pray. Amen and amen and amen.
Thank you again for joining us for this week's message. We believe your generosity is changing the world. If you'd like to partner with us, click the link in the description below. And we'll see you again next week.